Hi there, this is Christine from Soul of Senior Living on the Soul of Senior Living Insights show. And today with me, I'm super excited. I have my good friend Bernie on the line who is going to chat with us a little bit today about caregiving and some of the journeys that he's experienced as a primary caregiver for his wife. So, welcome, Bernie, and thank you so much for being here and chatting with me today.
You're quite welcome, and thank you for the invitation, Christine.
So, as we mentioned, you're the primary caregiver for your wife. Can you tell us a little bit about, perhaps what that journey's been like, what life was like before, and what life has been like after or since her diagnosis? And what is her diagnosis as a caregiver, I suppose, as well?
Yeah, our life was pretty normal for us, in that we spent 6 months in Canada and 6 months in Florida. We're both musicians, and we that was our life. We lived for playing music. We maintained a home here in Stittsville. And in 2000, in the winter of 2016-17, I noticed, and some of our friends in Florida were quite uh, aware and startled that Mavis was showing some signs of cognitive ability being reduced. So when we got back, she was tested. Making a long story short, she lost her driver's license in a bad way. There's a good way. There's a better way and a poor way of losing her driver's license. And she had a doctor that was not very competent in that area. So that was a bit of a rough patch. But the bottom line was the loss of a driver's license, even if you're not the main driver, as she wasn't, it's still critical. She could go out and get groceries and do little things like that in the car, and so that was all gone. And of course, I had to be the main driver, and we started the journey of looking into the the process, discussing it with our with our at that time new family doctor, who's been very good, and we were connected to the Briere. We went through all of the tests that they provide, and the conclusion was that Mavis was suffering with, they called it sort of advanced forms of dementia, but at the same time, it was hampering our lives. So it may have been advanced in their scheme, but it certainly had an effect, immediate effect on our family dynamic. The following year, I wouldn't go to Florida anymore. It was too risky. So that was a big change in our lives. And as we proceeded to get involved with the dementia group in town to try and learn as much as we could about the process and see what was available. Um, we found there were some things available that were helpful, and a lot of things were not. Uh, in part, I think the cross section is so great. You go to a dementia group meeting, and you've got people that are in their 70s and very active, uh, to people that are in their mid 80s, late 80s, and they're not very active. And it's very hard to combine that group with common interests and common uh, information that you can take away that would be productive. But they did provide exercise classes, which I valued highly. I viewed them as a fall prevention exercise. They have them in several locations in the city. Well done.
But they're geared to dementia and cognitive impairment, so they have that kind of more knowledgeable, or I guess gentle approach, perhaps. Is that kind of,
Uh,
am I right thinking that?
yeah, they have an understanding, and they're very. I don't want to use the word tolerant because that doesn't even come into the equation. But they're very understanding, and so you don't have to follow directions to the letter. And they work around it. They understand, and you can participate at the level and the exercises that you are comfortable, and not in the ones that you don't feel comfortable. So that was a big plus. We very active in those. The other thing that they had,
So
sorry,
you keep going. The other thing
they
you thought.
also had a lecture series where they had six uh, six professionals from several different disciplines giving a lecture, and I valued I valued that highly because I'm curious and I wanted to know what what the heck was going on, what the mechanisms were for this disease.
And when we met, you were hungry for knowledge. You were hungry for, like, you were like a sponge trying to find all this information, trying to figure it all out yourself. And I think that that's part of the process that one goes through. Was there any kind of, if you were to, talk to somebody else going through this same thing, uh, is there any tips you have for like learning about this and understanding not just the brain function, but like how to work with your wife now that she's got some impairments?
Well, in total disclosure, as I think you've mentioned, Christine, that you and I are friends, but you and
Yeah.
I became friends, excuse me, as a result of our interaction. So we met in sort of the beginning stages of this journey. And Salva, I have to say, were I mean they were absolutely essential, and they were totally helpful, and uh, they were.
You always tell me that story when I looked at you with my finger and said, "You need a plan. You need to get a
Yeah.
plan." And I didn't know you at the time, but I was like, "You need a plan."
Well, that finger in my chest was a good thing. Um, the point is, Christine, you guys were very understanding, very helpful, and although I didn't, I have to go my own way through this, or I had to go my own way through it. I tried to take everything that I could sort of put into action at the time, but the problem with this disease is it's a moving target. And so I get my head around one thing and go in a direction, and suddenly things change. Things never get better, by the way. I don't want to depress anyone, but uh, they
Yeah.
don't get better, they get worse. So I think in my particular case was to take the knowledge and the understanding that I could get from you guys, apply it to my situation at the time, and try and ease myself into the advancement, if you will, of this disease.
I think that's a great tip too, because that word, it's an ever moving target, and to say you need to ease yourself into it, because we could, when we first met, I could have said, okay, hey, you just need to start looking at retirement homes, but that wasn't the right fit for you guys. That's not where you were at. That's not, like, you needed to ease into the process and taking that immediate leap, which you guys are younger than pretty much the average person in a residence or assisted living. Um, Finding solutions so that you could continue to live as normal a life as possible in the setting that made the most sense for both of you was kind of the direction that you were thinking, but also that we were like trying to guide you towards. Um, and I think you've been able to do that up, up to now, and or you're still continuing to do that.
Well, that's right, and everyone has an idea on how they're going to approach this, and that's the other thing you learn at the dementia group. You go to a sit down. You've got 12 or 15 caregivers, and you may find someone else in that group that's in a similar situation, but everyone is different, you know. Um, so I had to decide what was best in my mind for us to do, and I knew Mavis, she's her disease is affecting her rear cortex. So as a result, although her vision is as good or better than mine, she can't see. She's I don't know where you'd put in the percentage of blindness, but she can't read, she can't do puzzles, she can't I have to explain a lot of things when she's watching TV even because her vision is so impaired. So that adds another dimension to this process. So that's what I mean. Like, not everyone has the same issues to deal with.
Yeah.
So Mavis is a follower, which means she doesn't want to be. We've lived happily together for 45 years, and we've been very close, uh, and so it doesn't surprise me, and it's probably better than the alternative. She wants to be near me, but what it does for me, it adds that burden that she doesn't want anyone else looking after her. She doesn't she doesn't do well at all at daycare. So you go to these meetings and you'll get some gentleman saying, "Well, yeah, I bring my wife to a daycare uh, program 3 times a week, and she loves it." Well, good for you. I'm pleased for you. But in my particular case,
Yeah.
that wasn't a non-starter. We tried 3 times, and 3 times it was a no-go. So that put an added burden on myself. And through a bit of luck and a very lovely gal at I shouldn't use gal, I guess, anymore. It's whatever. I
Yeah,
can
you
use
can use
gal.
gal.
Uh,
You can.
PSW, she would come twice a week for 3 hours each time. So out of a 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, I was getting some help for 2 3 hour sessions. And so I would leave and get my shopping done, or I would have a sleep because this,
Was that through the Lynn? Did you get
I
that
got
through the
that through the
Lynn?
Lynn, yes.
So that was a funded program through the Lynn. And how did you end up with this PSW that, because I believe, and I think that's one of the things that when I pointed my finger at you, is like, you need to go out and make these, because it's all about relationships. And you're talking about relationships right now, and the relationship you have with Mavis and the trust she has with you, like, if you're going to bring in a private caregiver or a caregiver through the Lynn or a PSW or a companion, it's about that. It's about rapport and connection with the individual. So how did you're like very lucky to find a caregiver that your wife had through the Lynn, because the Lynn services so many seniors. How did that happen for you? Were you Was that luck, or was that you kind of being more vocal? How did that
No,
happen?
I think our caseworker, uh, I think, is a lovely person, and I get the feeling she's on my side, on our side, and she did what she could to get the 2 3 hour sessions. And the way that worked, we had 2 different caregivers at first, and Mavis really cared for one and not so much the other, and that had nothing to do with the individual involved. That was, my wife. She she's not very accepting. She wants me. So, but fortunately, we're able to maintain the one for the 2 periods, and that went well. But when I to this day, if I mention, well, I think I'm going to bring somebody in, hire someone for half a day. I mean, this will induce a totally irate result, and I'll have to
Oh.
live with this for a day or 2 days while I calm it down, and of course I have to acquiesce and say, okay, forget about it.
So we're in COVID, so that means like a lot of things are shut down, and so on and so forth. How is this caregiver still involved with her? Or is she able to come to are you still able to maintain some of this routine that you've established, or what is life like for you right now?
I would say at the beginning of March, I wasn't comfortable, uh, and so probably a month before our premier decided that it wasn't a good idea, I decided that it wasn't a good idea. And as much as we like this gal, um, I I asked her not to come anymore. So we have been without a PSW from the beginning of March until now. And I have communicated with this caregiver, and in fact, she's coming over for a visit. Um, Several weeks after we had made that decision, this person had made the decision that she was going to take leave of absence because she was as frightened, and reasonably so, uh, as we were. So she has not worked and plans to go back to work the end of this month, end of June. So at this juncture, uh, I will be working to see if we can resume at that time. But the COVID deal means nobody's been in, and nobody's been out. I'm a car nut. I uh, I didn't turn a wheel on my car for a couple of months. It's the longest period in my life that I've never driven, and so we didn't go anywhere. I've fortunate. I met a couple of wonderful uh, gals. I use that word again. They sell real estate. In fact, they sold our house, and they've been friends ever since, and they've been picking groceries up for us. I can't say enough about these two women. They're lovely, lovely people. They've been more help. Frankly, they've been more help than.
What are their names? Because I know that you've told me about them a few times, and we've spoken to them on the back end a few times. But as a real estate agent, sometimes, or I guess like when you're selling anything, sometimes you sell the house, you go to a renting situation, and they move. Some realtors move on to the next sale. But these ladies didn't for you guys. So who are they?
Well, they sell for Remax out of Stittsville, and they're known as the Property Sisters, and their names are Patty Young and Patty and Cindy. Um, they they have
And
been. I mean, they've been more helpful than any family. Now, having said that, our daughter is in Brampton, so we have been unable since the beginning of COVID to get to our daughter. So she would be on the job here 100%. Uh, so they're not here, and these girls, Cindy Whitehead and Patty Young, they both know the situation that we're in. These two individuals helped us move not once but twice. Came here, set up stuff in our apartment, hung the paintings up. I can't say enough. So in the middle of all of this stuff, you run into a couple of individuals like that, and I got to tell you, it's heartwarming, and I feel the same uh, with Salva. Salva has been very helpful to us, and I know that I can pick up the phone and call you, Christine, anytime.
and and I know, and you know what? Here's the thing too, and I know because of a lot of the stuff going out with the long term care conversation right now. When you call me and I see your name now, I'm like, what I think is I'm going, okay, I have to talk to Bernie because there's something going on. Well, sometimes you call to chat and we have great debates, you and I, but like lately I can tell there's a concern and you want somebody to help you kind of understand what's being said out there, because the stuff going on, or what they're saying about long-term care, is really concerning to a lot of people. And then they start thinking, you know, well, I had this plan and long-term care was involved with that plan. Maybe I shouldn't be thinking about long-term care anymore. I don't know if that's how what your mind is wrapping around, but I certainly see your name these days and I'm like, I got to talk to Bernie. I got to.
Well, and I deeply appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. When we moved from the house, and our plan was to live in an apartment, I was hoping that I could get 3 to 5 years living with Mavis in an apartment. Um, I, I just shuddered literally at the thoughts of moving her to a long-term care, which was the plan. We were on the list. We were on the typical waiting list, and I mean it was so bad that when we first got on this list, I got a letter from the company uh, asking me to go over for a visit so we could see the place. I could see the place, and to this day, I've never gone. I just couldn't work up the. It was too emotional for me to even go over and take a look.
Yeah.
So now with this, can you imagine? Your wife is you don't know. Remember the moving target?
You're on the list. You're on this 5-year plan
That's right.
list.
That's right.
Uh, but this is happening. You're going, whoa, maybe should I
Well,
be on this
exactly.
list? Yeah.
And I have an associate who was he's a psychologist, and I see him a couple of times a week because we play music together. To be truthful, and I haven't seen him. I have to talk to him now because of this COVID. So that's another thing with this COVID. The only outlet that that my wife had was when these guys would come over and play music once a week, and we had to quit doing that, of course. So uh, the the business with this long term care, we can listen to all these principals skating around, but uh, they're guilty. They've been guilty for a long time. The premier removed $35 million from the budget for this business. He knew that. He removed it. He reduced the inspections. He reduced them. So he stands up and says, in an emotional presentation, uh, how upset he was and how this was all a surprise. Everybody else knew it. So, and they're going to have to go beyond politicians and chop a few heads. Not that that's going to make a difference, but they're going to have to chop a few heads and, in my opinion, go into the public servants that are benefiting uh, as public servants and have moved on to be principals in some of these businesses. They've got to remove these people.
Well, I mean, we could probably spend an hour, and we have already spent hours offline talking about this. But uh, you know, uh, the team and I'm not a limelighter. You know me, I kind of like to be
Yeah.
behind the scenes, and this even this podcasting thing is weird for me to have these kind of conversations. But um I wrote an op-ed about this, and I mean, I'm one little voice. I am independent. I don't really have an agenda. But you're right that what needs to happen is we need to take the politickers, the financial gainers, and the lobbyers out of the conversation. But we also need to look at the whole thing. It's not just long-term care, it's retirement homes, it's home care. The whole thing is interconnected and it should all work together in collaboration, but they work in silos. And the thing is, yeah, we're getting a lot of long-term care terrible scathing stories, but we do need, I mean, especially somebody like you that is in the middle of it, that has a loved one that is changing, and the amount of stress that you've had to take on over the past 3 months, because it's all on you now. You're not getting any support really, except for your, people like the real estate friends that drop off groceries, but real tangible relief,
Mhm.
respite. There are good news stories out there. Some long-term cares have done well. And my team has been debating this, because when it comes to services like ours, like independent services, like we're the only ones that know how long-term care, retirement, like how it all works, because we've all worked in it. But like there are some that are doing well. A lot of the ones that have been highlighted on the news are privately owned. I used to work in long-term care and worked in public nonprofits. Now, the epiphany I had the other day was that the public nonprofits, they've got foundations that raise money. They have, like, the one of the places that I worked had 300 volunteers. So there are good places. And yeah, can it be better? 100%, it can always be better. And the minute you take the financial gainers and the politickers and the lobbyers out of that conversation, because my concern right now, and I think I've expressed it to you offline, and this whole call is supposed to be about you right now, and now we're kind of squirreling off into another conversation, is my concern is that the people that have agenda are the ones that get invited to the table for the conversation, and then we continuously don't make progress. When That's why we see this coming from the military, because the military is no nonsense, right? There's no drama, there's no agenda, and they can write a report in 2 weeks and say these are some of the problems that we've seen. um, and it's fascinating at how quickly they can get things done when you take all of that out. So I want to just kind of assure you as a caregiver that there is good, and this is maybe a little bit of a segue that we can end the show to, but like there is good providers out there, but you have to know where to look for them, and you need to know where to navigate. So one of the problems I see when I talk to clients is trying to navigate all this. Like how have you handled all that?
Well, through a through a great deal of fear, I would say. Excuse me. Um, when we sold the house, I had made the decision that um, I was I knew at least that my time was not going to be my own, and I knew that I couldn't be doing other things. Um, I understood that I couldn't do the things I used to do because I couldn't leave Mavis alone. And I used to be a car guy. I used to be able to play music. All of that stuff I knew was in certain jeopardy. So I figured we would sell sell it, and I would. It sounds hokey, but I would devote myself to what I had to do to look after my wife through this business. And I'm not the only one that's done this, uh, but it's the sort of thing that you have to do because I'm not going to warehouse. I'm not going to warehouse my wife. I'm going to look after her. So that you become totally focused, and at the same time you're on an emotional ride because there are good days and there are bad days, and the good days you say, well, that's not too bad, and then on the bad days you say, oh geez, this is for real. So you're on this emotional coaster and you're not getting any breaks. At least in my case, I'm not. And through COVID, a lot of people aren't getting any breaks. And there's advice out there people take. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. I'm an associate that I've seen from time to time at the dementia group, and he was in a situation that he went uh, for advice to one of the folks there, and he took the advice, and it turned out not to be good, and so he had to make an adjustment again. So people can give you their best advice, and it can sometimes fail. So you really, it's not like other diseases where you can script the way things are going to work. There's no script for this business.
I also think that, like, when it comes to advice and guidance and stuff, some people can make assumptions generically based on what everybody else has done, and certainly understanding what other people have done is a good thing to help you make an
Agreed.
informed decision. But like everybody's individual situation is
Yes.
different. And everybody has different goals and different needs and different thresholds of how much they can bear. And so my I always like to ask somebody, like, look, how do you want to live? How do you want your loved one to live? What do you see for the future? Because if you can start with that vision of what life can be like, understanding what that the situation, of the condition or whatever, what that progression might look like. How do you want your loved one to live? You can start to build out kind of that plan of, step. We're gonna like you did. We're gonna get into this new environment, this kind of apartment living rental environment, and for 5 years, and then from there we're going to move on to kind of that next step, and so on and so forth. So I don't think you can give guidance when you're dealing with a condition that is 100% different for every single person. All you can do is give somebody, here's some here's some
Yeah.
information, and you can help guide them to a place that they give them a few different roads that they can map out, and that they make the best decision. But you're, as you said before, it's an ever changing. So as I point my finger at you, you need to have plan A, plan B, and plan C, so that way when or if a crisis happens, you're still in the driver's seat of it. You don't end up in the hospital like a lot of seniors do, unfortunately, where the hospital's now saying you got to get out, and you can't go home.
Yeah,
So
you're right. You take the
yeah.
information and you try and apply what's relevant to yourself, and hope like heck, um, that you're doing a reasonable job, and that you have the ability to change when necessary. And you can't. There's no such thing as being set in your ways anymore. You have to do what you have to do.
and and like you did, you surround yourself by trusted advisors, and people that you can
That's,
call upon to support you when
that's
and if
exactly.
those things change. Okay, Bernie, we're gonna cut it off here because I think we went over our tentative 30 minutes like we always do. And I'm sure we'll come back, and we'll have a full-on debate about the long-term care system, and all of our thoughts on a separate issue of headlines and seniors issues. So thank you so much again, and give your lady a big hug for me, and
I'll
we'll
do
chat
that,
with
and
you
thank you very
very
much.
soon.
Was enjoyable. Good one.
It was
Okay.
fun,
Bye
eh?
bye.
Okay, we'll talk
Bye bye.
soon. Bye.